This is a house of debate. This is a house of a government making reasoned arguments and, by and large, trying to win an argument. We've seen chaos over the recent weeks. But I go back to my own dilemma in this. It's been reflected by others. I also voted for this war. It was against the advice of many friends I have, both in the defense industry, those that have some connections with intelligence, and those that write for the newspapers, colleagues here and elsewhere. And yet, I disregarded their advice because I was confronted with a Prime Minister who assured me that this was necessary to the national interest. Why should I suspend my own judgment? I'm normally the most critical of individuals. Why was I showing deference to a proposition put forward by a Prime Minister? I'm old enough as a boy to remember Eden. We marched when Suez happened at my school in the CCF to show our patriotic fervour. Within months, Eden was discredited, and unfortunately health meant that he left the country for a longish period. What we had in Eden was a Prime Minister who lied to this House, according to Edward Heath, who in a broadcast said he knew he had made a lie on the floor of the House over the events surrounding Suez. He was asked, Mr. Heath that is, was asked, "What did you do?" "Well, I got on with it, didn't I?" Now that's what's happened to this House. Too many of us get on with it, don't we? That's our duty, isn't it, to support the government that we were elected with, or as a consequence of our election, becomes the government. Now we have, confronting us, the very things that Torridge sticks in my mind. But is it not Denning who said, "However mighty the citizen, the law is mightier still"? That's what's behind so much of the construction of these motions. Not constructed by this House, incidentally, but constructed by the executive on the advice of Westminster, of Whitehall, presumably. It is designed to ensure that no one can be found culpable and suffer the consequences of misadvising, shall we put it, whatever committee comes into existence. Perjury is an awful threat, and the consequences of perjury are dramatic. In fact, a cabinet minister from this House perjured himself and went to prison. That's what the jeopardy is if you or they or whoever should mislead a properly founded inquiry with an oath sworn on it and the prospect of retribution if candour is not employed before the inquisitors. I think it is terribly important, that concept. Now I think on that central question of the oath, could an oath be administered? We see how it's dealt with, adequately referred to by others in this House on the paper. It's almost derisory. He wants the chairman, or the proposer of the motion, the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary, they want the chairman of the inquiry to consult party leaders and chairs of the relevant parliamentary committees on the scope for taking evidence. Now, are you telling me, Madam Speaker, I'm sure you're not, but are we actually thinking that a briefed minister, or have they given up being briefed seriously? One of the central questions on this order paper, the Secretary of State coming in front of this House, is what is this scope for taking an oath? They must have questioned and been advised on that central proposition. But we saw the Foreign Secretary, in that wonderful, elegant, nonchalant way, dance away from the question. All the time, it was about the scope. People should inquire, ask around, find out. They don't know? Of course they know. That's the deceits that follow in propositions foisted upon this House by the executive with the advice of Whitehall. I have no idea what the advice in Whitehall was, but I do not doubt that it would have been a question at which they asked themselves and advised this government that this had implications whether it was on oath or not on oath. That's why this is a struggle between this chamber, we as elected representatives of the people, we as elected, checking and holding to account a government. I've noted, since I voted for this war, I share some of the emotions of those. Events have moved on. We had the inquiry into the circumstances of the death of Dr. Kelly. What a revelation. All the emails from Alistair Campbell to now Sir John Scarlett, head of intelligence, the Prime Minister's special advisor, saying that the contents of the memorandum, one of the memorandums, the dodgy memorandum, don't seem to lead to the conclusion. The conclusion? What conclusion? The conclusion of going to war. It was altered. We know that from the Hutton inquiry. The silence from the Foreign Office, the dog that did not bark in the night. No emails are coming from the now Lord Chancellor and Lord High Panjandrum inquiring about intelligence, MI6. What about the Department of Defense with the former Chief Whip of the Labour Party, then Secretary of State, where the Defence Intelligence Unit was querying what was the single source, etc. So there am I, having taken the word of a British Prime Minister on here, I see unravelling the very props by which I reinforced my vote. I want to know, in a proper, full inquiry, the circumstances of how we went to war. I want to be able to reconcile in my mind the contradictions of I know nothing about the circumstances surrounding the death of Dr. Kelly, to I am responsible for all these matters. That was the Prime Minister then in front of Hutton and the conversation he gave on an airline. When I asked him on the floor of the House of Commons, he said, "Oh, we must wait till the outcome of Hutton." Did Hutton answer the question? How did he reconcile two seemingly contradictory statements? Not a bit of it. I want an inquiry, as I think everyone in this House who is really serious about the business of this House and our representative function, that actually explicitly looks into the matters of concern that had affected a matter of great public policy, going to war, and as the Prime Minister tolls out the lives of others that have been sent there, we are tolling our own bell, and we need no servants to inquire. We should be the dynamic in this process of establishing what is the appropriate form of an inquiry.
Guy Davis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I think looking around the chamber this afternoon, I'm probably the junior member. But I've heard today some of the most powerful, incisive